Coach Klimas came up to me after that. As soon as I walked off the mound in the last inning that I pitched, he came to me when I was sitting on the bench, and he could tell that I was upset. He said, "Hey, listen, I don't want you to feel like you have to worry because I know the work that you're putting in.
Yeah.
And I know I can see it." And it's like, it gave me peace, knowing of like, there was a security in the culture. There was this security of like, okay, I'm doing what he's asking me to do. And so I'm safe here.
Well, guys, welcome to the Game Changers League podcast, where we're cultivating culture and shaping the future of sports with our conversations. I'm your host, Aaron Johnson, former athletic director and 20-year head coach of varsity girls and boys basketball programs in South Carolina and Oklahoma. And this is my co-host.
My name's Corey Murphy. I played baseball at Butler Community College and Rogers State University through the years of 2016 through 2021. Thankful to be here. Thankful to be a part.
Yeah, Corey's become one of my closest friends since relocating out to Oklahoma, and excited to do this with him. So today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about some of the building blocks of culture. We've been talking about, how culture impacts athletic programs, or how it is expressed in an athletic program. And you can look all around the country. You look at high school sports, college sports, professional sports, and you see how culture is such a big part of every program. I've heard it said, and I believe this with my whole heart, that the best coaches spend more time focusing on their culture than they do strategies, X's and O's, all of that. Player development obviously being a big part of how you build culture in that. But focusing on their culture, protecting their culture, building their culture, all of those things play a critical role in the success of any athletic program.
Absolutely.
And so I've asked Corey today, if he would, to just take a moment and kind of share. He was a part of a conference championship baseball program here at Rogers State. And in that season, it was really a special year, great accomplishment. What were some of the standards that were set? Because in looking at the building blocks of culture, nothing more important than the standards and values that you have within your program and how you hold people accountable to that as you're building. And so, Corey, why don't you kick us off by sharing, just out of your experience, what some of those standards and values were for you guys?
Yeah, on that 2019 baseball team, man, there's so much I could say. I would say probably one of the real core building blocks that Coach Klimas integrated early, and I'm still around the program. I live here in Claremore, and I still go to games and talk with Coach Klimas a lot. And if there's one word that I could use to describe him, it's consistency.
Yeah.
It didn't matter whether we were winning or losing. We had a fantastic year. I think we ended up going 36-18 in the regular season, but it was always consistent. It didn't matter whether we just played terrible or we just played the best game of our life. It was like, we're going to get back to base.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate now. Tomorrow when you wake up, that's done. It's washed. It's over. Let's go back to work, just like it's day one. And he was very consistent in practice schedule. He was very consistent in what we worked on. Fundamentals was another huge piece of like, we're going to get the small things right. If we're going to play ball, we're going to play ball. We're going to bunt. We're going to field bunts well. Our pitchers are going to be able to field a bunt and throw somebody out at first. We're going to minimize errors. Another huge one that I think he really integrated into our team was self-governed hard work.
Yeah.
Was like, he really put the onus on us as players to say, hey, in the NCAA, we have regulations as far as how often we can play or how often we can practice.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to decide what you want this team to be. If you want to win a conference, this was at the beginning of the year. If you want to achieve the goals like win a conference championship, play in a regional, have a chance to go to the World Series, things like that, it's going to be revealed in how you work.
Yeah.
And the way that you work matters.
Yeah.
And what are you doing when nobody's looking? What are you doing when the crowd's not there or your teammates aren't even there? Are you going and are you working on the things that we talk about in practice, but we don't have time we get 20 hours a week. We don't have time to spend 10 hours on the smallest thing. It's like, what you need to get better at. What you need to work on. That was communicated well. excuse me. And the onus was put on us as the player of like, have self-governance to say, I'm going to continue to work and I'm going to continue to put in the time because I'm going to see the payoff later.
I love that. I think that that's key to probably the success of any program, is the self-governance piece of it. Holding players accountable to, you got to be the one that does the work. All we can do. You said this in our last episode that coaches oftentimes may provide the framework or may facilitate the building of culture, but it's ultimately the players that are responsible for how that culture materializes.
Sure.
And I think the self-governing part of it, the personal work, the personal growth mindset that comes with that, every player taking responsibility for getting better, that's a big part of that. So with that, like how were some of the ways that Coach would hold y'all accountable to that?
Well, I wouldn't say the way that he would hold us accountable is he knew. I don't know how,
Yeah.
but he always knew. Like, he knew who worked and he knew who didn't.
And probably by what you produced on the field.
Yeah. I'll give you a great example. Week 2 of our season, we went down to UTPB in the first week. I struggled on the mound. I didn't have a great game. My whole life, I prided myself on working hard. I was never the best, most talented player, but I always really gave my all in everything that I did. And so that entire week, Coach Brown, who was my pitching coach, he gave me some key things of like, hey, this is where I saw some adjustment needed. These are some small things that you could work on. And every single day, I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I worked on it throughout the week. And week 2 was a little bit better, but it still wasn't a great outing. Yeah. I think I gave up like 3 or 4 runs in 5 innings, but we won the game, but it wasn't to the standard that I wanted to be. Coach Klimas came up to me after that. As soon as I walked off the mound in the last inning that I pitched, he came to me when I was sitting on the bench, and he could tell that I was upset. He said, hey, listen, I don't want you to feel like you have to worry because I know the work that you're putting in.
Yeah.
And I know I can see it. And it's like, it gave me peace, knowing of like, there was a security in the culture. There was this security of like, okay, I'm doing what he's asking me to do. And so I'm safe here.
Yeah.
There's reward for that. Now, that might not mean that I get to start every game if I continue to not perform, but it's like, hey, you're propelling the culture. You're following the lead of what I asked you to do, and there's safety in that.
Yeah, man, what a huge motivator. To be able to, as a coach, to be able to make sure that a player understands that, hey, you can go out and make mistakes, and that's okay. I think that one of the things as a coach that I have tried to instill in our players is a confidence. Don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to do something a little bit different for fear that you're going to mess up. Because the moment, in basketball, the moment that you got players thinking too much on the court, like there's a fine balance. You hear people talk about like IQ and things of that nature, the game and thinking through the game. There's a fine balance between thinking through the game and overthinking while playing. And the biggest reason why a lot of players overthink is they put that pressure on themselves, whether it's from this fear that coach is going to bench me or whatever it may be, or maybe there's people in the stands that they're trying to hold up some type of standard, and how they play for, but they put that pressure on themselves to where like they can't make mistakes, Yeah. And I think one of the healthiest cultures that I see, or healthiest components of culture that I see in athletic programs is whenever you can go to your players and say, look, I don't mind if you make a mistake.
Yeah.
Just make it 100 miles an hour.
That's right.
Like, just make it with great effort. Make it with great intention. You know what I mean? Like, and I can live with the mistakes. We will get better. We will grow from the mistakes.
Yeah.
And I know as a coach, that was something that was really, really important to me. To instill in the players that I coached, and so whenever I was at St. John's back in South Carolina, I took over a program that was really it was really kind of in bad shape as an athletic program as a whole. The girls basketball program, I think, had won 1 or 2 games the year before. Girls sports just in general were really struggling. Our men's sports, kind of the same thing. We were starting to have some breakthrough. There was a guy that was there before me, Thomas Brittle, who's now an assistant baseball coach at Tulane University, who had begun to do some things to move us in the right direction. And then he took an assistant coaching position up at Clemson, and then went on and is now at Tulane. But he established some things that were there, but it really wasn't so much as far as the culture, other than it was the biggest thing that he impacted was this raising this expectation that, hey, there's going to be better athletes coming into the school. And as those athletes come into the school, like, everybody's got to take on a personal responsibility for development, and growing, because otherwise the reality is you're just going to get beat out for playing time and things of that nature. But there wasn't a lot of success. I think in the 10 years before I came there was one athlete that went on to play college sports, a young lady that went and played softball. But over the next 3 years, we had 12 student athletes that went to play college sports, and a lot of that was about, like, changing the culture, raising the expectation levels, really teaching personal responsibility. We went from a point of having like 10 to 15 to maybe 20 kids participating in our summer conditioning program to 75, 80 kids participating in our summer conditioning program, and they began to take that personal responsibility, and kids began to believe that they could compete. We played for a state championship in football, had two Final Four teams in basketball. Men's basketball went on and won a state championship. Our baseball program finally took that next step forward and won a state championship during the time that I was there. And so we got to see some really amazing things that happened. But the biggest thing that I had to overcome whenever I went there was everybody was kind of pulling in their own direction. There wasn't a lot of cohesion. Everybody kind of had their own ideas and were doing their own things within each individual sport and each individual team. And so, we really tried to pull together our coaches staff, our booster club, everybody to get everybody kind of pulling in the same direction to try to accomplish the things that we set out to do. And so cohesion was a big part of that. I want you to talk to me a little bit about, from your experience playing at Rogers State, how do you do that as a team? All right, so y'all had standards. You talk about personal responsibility. That's a big part of that. But how did they focus on bringing everybody together to pull in the same direction?
I think that's a really big piece when you talk about culture. I think sometimes culture can just be this, like, out there fairy dust kind of thing that people don't truly understand, And I mean, you look at incredible teams like Alabama, the Nick Saban era. It's like the turnover that he had with coaches and with players, of course, being in college, massive. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get to my experience.
Oh, I believe.
But it's like the turnover is massive that he experienced, but the culture was the same, and the results, they might vary year to year, but as far as success, it was the same.
Yeah.
Every year Alabama rolled the balls out in the fall.
That's right.
10 wins was honestly,
like, the offense coordinator was.
No.
Yeah.
Didn't matter who the defensive coordinator was. It didn't matter who the players were. It's like every single year in, year out, Nick Saban produced some of the best college football programs that have ever existed. Yeah. And it's like, that speaks to culture. And it's not something, I think it is something that's difficult to navigate and maybe understand, because there is times where it's like there is a healthy culture, but maybe you just don't have the players. Maybe teams are just more talented.
Right.
That happens.
Yeah.
But, like, as far as Rogers State, the year before I got there, because 2019 when we won that conference championship was my junior year. Coming out of junior college, that was my first year. I had just had shoulder surgery that summer, and so I wasn't, honest, that's a long story. They never thought I'd throw a baseball again before that shoulder surgery. But I end up, the Lord worked a miracle, and I get to play Rogers State, and that's a long story. But I come in the fall, and I can't pitch for 8 weeks after my surgery. I was just in very, very slow rehab that was ran by the personal trainer there, or the athletic trainer there. And so I didn't get to play in any of the inter squads, nothing. At the very end, we were in something called our Fall World Series, and I got to pitch 1 inning at the very end, and it wasn't really live. It was just like, hey, you're going to face 3 batters. That's the only time I got to pitch all fall. Going to my exit meeting, and this made a lot of people angry. I go into my exit meeting, Coach Clemens tells me, hey, you're going to be day 1 starter. You're going to start game 2. And it was like, well, that's weird. Okay, I trust it and I believe it. Well, then come in the springtime, and this all relates to culture. I asked Coach Clemens, like, hey, like, not that I don't revel in the opportunity, but why?
Yeah.
You know, why I didn't get to play. And he was like, I've known from the time I signed you, I know how hard you work. And from the people that I talked to, there's nobody else for the job. He was like, okay. So then, you know, it comes to the team. That was kind of a random tangent. But as far as like the culture of the team, we were projected to finish 6th out of 8th in our conference that year.
Right.
We weren't even expected to make the tournament. And that came out, I want to say that the preseason standings came out like November, maybe December, something like that. And we had a group of seniors who called a team meeting that was not like, no coaches were involved. And they handed out sheets of paper with these standings, projected standings on them. And, you know, a lot of the seniors spoke during that meeting, but they were like, hey, this season's going to be what we make it.
Yeah.
And it was weird because it was like, it was all things that we heard from Climas.
Yeah.
But it was the senior leaders of that team that really propelled forward that culture of like, hey, this season's going to be what we make it. We're going to continue to do what we've done in the past, because they had multiple unsuccessful years as far as like winning championships or anything like that. They were a 500 or below 500 team. And it was like, this season's going to be what we make it. We have the talent. We can do it. It's just a matter of if we're going to put the work in to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, it propelled, again, we talked about this in episode 1. There was this framework of culture that coaches have, or that they lay the foundation for it, but the players really have to buy into that culture. You know, some of the most toxic environments are when the players step outside of the foundation that the coach is trying to lay for culture.
Yep.
It's like, that's when teams fall apart.
Yep.
I've experienced that too.
They become divided. You know,
Yeah.
It becomes a me versus
100%.
Yeah.
And it is like, I saw in 2019 those senior leaders step forward and really propel the culture that Coach Climas was trying to lay the foundation. And it was like, that was what propelled us forward. That all year long, we had so much cohesiveness, because it was like, it's us.
Yeah.
It's never me. It's never, I threw a no-hitter, so I won us the game.
Yeah.
Or you hit the game-winning home run. You hit the walk-off, so you're the guy. It was us.
Yeah.
The whole way through and through.
Yeah.
And it was like 1 through 9, and starters, relievers, closers. We were all just so together, and it was like we were truly one.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And that's what I see culture as, is like, it's a marriage.
Yeah.
It really is, because the coach can try to lay the foundation, but the players really have to step into line with it and carry it. And
yeah, I love that. You know, you said something about like toxic cultures, and you know, there's a couple of things that kind of come to my mind. I've heard it said that, you know, that a toxic culture is like carbon monoxide. You know, you can't smell it, you don't know it until it's too late. Like, and we see this, you know, happening. We see this happening across college football, college basketball right now.
Yeah.
With the NIL era, with the transfer portal. You know, and you know, not to pick on any teams, but you look at Florida State, they go and have this great season. They bring in a few transfers that have this great season, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, we're going to that's the way
they were projected to win the ACC
the next year, and they had the worst season in the history of Florida State football in probably 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, this idea that you can just bring people in and plug and play.
Yep.
And that it works. And I'm not saying it can't. I mean, you look at Colorado. I mean, they had a different story there, you know, and I think part of that is you have such a polarizing figure as their head coach that's just like, you know, this is what we're going to be, and we're all going to pull in this direction, and I'm not going to take your jump, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I think Nick Saban, that's why he was able to have turnover on his staff and players kind of come in and go and transfer in and out, but still be able to have the success that he had for so long, you know. But the reality of the situation is it really is the players that carry the onus of responsibility to carry that culture forward and to build a positive championship level culture. It's that I think that's so important. One of the definitions I love, I've heard this many times, or I've used this before, is that culture is what happens to you when you're in it. Like, it's hard to define what culture is, but it's really what happens to you when you're in it. A great culture is going to pull the best out of you.
Yeah.
If you go in and you're part of a team, you transferred into that team coming out of junior college, and you were a part of that program, and there was something that was established. There was senior leadership that was established. You had a head coach that had laid the framework, and out of that, there was something that was pulled out of you, and it was the best of what you could be. I mean, obviously, so many of those characteristics were a part of you because it's part of your character. It's who I know you to be. But yet at the same time, you can go into that environment and the best pull that out of you, at an even greater level. Or you can go into that environment and it's like, man, the best of who I am is just suppressed, because of the way the culture is. And
man, that is a fantastic. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and so I think that's really, really important for coaches, for players, for student athletes to understand. If you're a team captain, if you're a leader in a program, it's to understand like the impact that you can have on it.
Yeah.
And what do you do whenever you go into a toxic culture? You shared the story in our first episode about how whenever you went to junior college there, how you became public enemy number one with the way that you worked, because there were a lot of guys cutting corners, and that was the culture of that team, know. And so you had the opportunity to impact that and call guys to a higher level. Then you go to Rogers State, and as the new guy, you got senior leaders that are setting that example and saying, like, look, guys, this is going to be what we make it. Yeah. It's going to be, the work that we put in that produces the results that we all want.
Yeah.
And I think that the standards, the values that are set for your program, whether that's introduced by the head coach, but it's got to be carried by the players. It's so important that those standards and values are set with team leadership. The best teams are the teams where the leadership comes from the players, the best players on the team, not from the coaches.
It's true.
Like if you've got, and we've all seen this. I've had teams that were like this, where I had players, man, who just had all kinds of skill and ability, but had a terrible attitude, had terrible leadership skills, and they bring the team down. And then I've had other players that weren't nearly as talented, but because they were great leaders and because they worked their butts off, they pulled the team up. And those teams were always more successful. And so those standards, those values that exist in team culture are so important. And I love this conversation that we're having. And I think that we're going to continue to see, where, particularly at the high school level, where coaches begin to understand this. They begin to understand the importance of this. And, it's tough because you got change and you got turnovers and, turnover and different things that happen that sometimes disrupt that. But you show me the guys that are able to stay somewhere for a long period of time as a coach and establish a culture, and they're able to pass that down, from one generation to the next of players, and the expectations are set, the standards are set, that it caused, you have the consistency you talked about in the beginning, to where players come in and they know what's expected of them and they produce at that level.
Yeah.
And so, I love this conversation, man. All right. So let's switch gears for just a moment. You're a big OU fan. I'm a big Clemson fan. Let's take a few minutes here at the end of this podcast, of this episode. Oh, boy. Let's talk about what is it happening. So I saw some statistics, today. Clemson leads the nation in returning production for the upcoming football season. OU is 10th. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize they were in the top 10 because you lost so many players to the transfer portal, but a lot of those guys appear to be backups, so you still retain a lot of your production.
Yeah.
You made some coaches changes. Clemson's made some coaching changes. What do you see happening?
Man, it's so hard to keep up with the landscape of college football right now. I mean, it's just so wild. We can talk about that another time. But Jaron Kanak, who was a linebacker for Oklahoma, he just transitioned.
He was committed to Clemson when Brent Davis was there.
And the story of that is incredible. So Jaron Canick wanted to play for Brent Venables. He committed to Clemson to come play for Brent Venables in his defense.
Yeah.
And then Brent Venables took the head coaching job at Oklahoma the year after, or during the offseason. And so he wanted to transfer. Well, he called Brent Venables and he told him, no, you stay committed to Clemson.
Yeah.
Like, stay committed, because that's your word and that matters.
Yeah.
And you committed to that university. Well, very long story, but eventually he talks to Dabo, Canick does, and BV. He talks to Dabo and is like, listen, I'm not trying to poach any of your players. I didn't take this job so I could pull all the guys that I developed on defense to help me. Like, that's not who I want to be. That's not what this university is going to stand for. Well, eventually Canick comes to Oklahoma, and he was a linebacker. And it seemed like every time he got in last year, because he played most games last year, he was busting a lot. Now, BV runs an extremely complicated defense. The scheme is supposedly, from people that have played for him, one of the most complex schemes that they've played in. And so, well, he was really struggling, and instead of transferring, and in this interview, it's really cool. He talks about the current landscape of college football and how he doesn't see it right to just jump because things aren't going well.
Yeah.
And so he made the transition to tight end.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So he's going to be playing tight end for OU this year.
Wow.
Because I guess, they had their exit meeting, and BB just told him, like, listen, it's not working out like we want it to on defense. The production's just not there. There's too many busts. There's too many things going on. And so he was like, okay, let me switch. Because he was an all-star in high school. He played both ways, of course, which you see from all those high-level athletes. But it's like, I'm not going to leave.
Yeah.
My work isn't producing the fruit that I want it to. So I'm going to shift gears. If you see that I could possibly have some potential to play here, I'll switch here, and I'll plug here, and I'll give my everything to that. And it's like, I just thought that was such a cool story and such a revealer of the culture that BV's really trying to set and solidify at Oklahoma. Everybody says Oklahoma football's dead and all of this, and because of what they've done,
Patience.
and culture takes time.
Yeah.
Of course, I wasn't a part of the program, so I can't speak to what the culture was before, but from Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma, it really did gut our program.
Sure.
We lost all of our players. We lost the majority of our coaching staff. And it's like, it was almost like, here's a fresh slate. And Brent Venables came in and was like, okay, here's how I'm going to do it. And it's not the fast way.
Yeah.
It's not the quick and easy fix. It's not the Florida State one-season winner.
Right.
But it's like, I want to build something that lasts. I want to build something that is going to stand through the crazy landscape of college football right now. It's going to stand through all of the transfers and all of I want the most NIL money I can possibly get. Like, that culture that he's building there, I really do see in the long term of, like, if fans will be patient, if Joe C will stay patient and not fire him, which I don't think he's going to, but if we'll just stay patient, I truly believe that the University of Oklahoma in 2-3 years is going to be in a better spot than we've been since the 80s, or early 2000s, I'll say, with Bob Stoops.
I agree. I think that and I'd like to joke around and tell everybody here in Oklahoma that, the reason why Brent Venables is going to be so successful for you is because he came to Clemson to learn how to win national championships. But he was a big part of that, and really he was a blessing to that university. But I really like Brent V. I like what he does. I like what he stands for. And I do believe that he understands the culture piece and how to build that.
Well, I think he got a lot from Dabo.
He did. He learned,
and he worked under Bob Stoops.
Yeah,
I mean, two incredible head coaches.
To do it. So, I mean, Clemson has a similar story, about a player that has stuck it out. Adam Randall, who was a receiver, dealt with some injuries, overcame those, but hasn't had the production level that everybody thought he would as a receiver. We bring in Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, this great recruiting class, and now all of a sudden you've got these really, Clemson's finally getting back to that receiving core that they had during those national championship years. And Adam Randall sitting there like, well, where do I fit in here? And Dabo comes to him and says, hey, why don't you move to running back? And they do this before the Texas game going into the playoff. So literally like a week to make the switch, and the brother's, playing at running back and has the longest run I think that Texas had given up all year. He had a 40-yard run, and I think he had somewhere close to 80 yards rushing on the day. And he'd been playing running back for a week.
Yeah.
And so they decided, hey, we're going to keep you there. And he could have been like, no, I'm a receiver. Like, I'm going to transfer out. I don't want to do
Absolutely.
this. But he's like, no, I love Clemson. I love the culture here. You hear so many guys talk about that. I love this. I want to stick this out. I want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing out of spring practice, it sounds like it's sticking. Like he's taken the leadership of the room and of the running back room and is really making a name for himself there. So it's interesting to see how all of this goes, and how it plays out. I think that college football, it's just one of those things to where I'm not so sure that the whole concept and idea of how culture impacts the success of a program is more evident in college football right now, because the teams that are the most consistent during all of the chaos and craziness are the teams that have put a major emphasis and focus on culture.
Yeah.
Georgia, Clemson, even with OU struggles because of all of the change and turnover that happened there, but they're still going to build based on culture.
Yeah.
And I'm just such a firm believer in this.
Yeah.
And so, listen, it's been a great conversation today. Thank you for joining in with us, and make sure that you subscribe to our podcast. Hit us up on all of our social media platforms. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we look forward to talking to you again next time.
We'll see y'all.